Hello again, and in this lesson we're going to create our 6th game illusion. So once again, up to File, load from your computer. We're going to load our 6th game template file, 06 color wheel segments. So let's open that up, and I'm just going to pause a moment to allow you to load the template game. And let's begin by just reviewing the sprites and the stage. The stage, we go to backdrops, once again is just a rectangular vector image, a black box. And the sprite this time, which is called wheel, more appropriately I think, because it is a segmented wheel, and we've got black and red segments. We're going to add a color effect to this wheel, and having a strong color like red really helps the color effect to work. If you try it with just black and white, you'll find you just get a vague tint. So starting with a strong color in our sprite will give us some very vibrant color effects. And we'll go back to the stage, and we'll just start on the code tab and add in our usual code. We've done this many times. I could just stay silent for a minute. You know what you're doing. Hopefully I do too. If you've started the course in the middle, then you might want to go back to the beginning. The first few, I think, lessons I explain what I'm doing here. Now let's pause again to allow you to add this code to the stage. Okay, let's select the wheel sprite. Next we need to create some variables for our game. So over to variables, make a variable, and the first one we need is spin speed. You can leave this for all sprites. We could make this for this sprite only, but you may add some more sprites to your game and want to use this variable with the other sprites, so let's just leave it for all sprites. And the second variable we need is going to be called color rate. Now we need both of these variables as sliders, and it doesn't matter where we put these on the stage, but they need to be down at the bottom. What I mean to say is it doesn't matter which is in which corner. And we're going to turn each into a slider, so we will right click to turn each one into a slider. Then we can position them a little bit better, like so. There we go. And we need to right click again and change the slider for the color rate to 0 to 200, like so. And the spin speed one, we want this to be -15 to 15. So let's pause again, and you can go ahead and create these two sliders and set their minimum and maximum values. Let's go forward and put on our property code blocks. So when I receive begin game, from motion we're going to add our go to XY property, and you'll notice that we're going slightly higher on the y-axis. That is just so we're lifting the wheel slightly above our two slider displays down here. And we can go ahead and add a pointing direction 90. From looks, we're going to set our size to 100. We're going to send this sprite to the back layer. That is important, as you'll learn in future steps. And finally, we want to hide this sprite. You'll remember that when we're cloning a sprite, we want to show the clones but hide the original sprite. Now I'm going to pause to allow you to add this code. Okay, next we need to initialize our variables. That means set them to their initial values. So once again, when I receive begin game, we are going to set both variables and we're going to make sure they both show. So set color rate to 0 and show color rate. Set spin speed to 0 and show spin speed. They're already showing on the stage, but we need to make absolutely sure that they do that when the game begins. Let me pause and let you add this code. Okay, moving on. Another when I receive begin game, and we're going to create our cloning code now. We're going to put a wait of 0.1 seconds to make sure that the previous algorithms, the property and the variables initialization algorithms, have done their jobs. Now, we're going to create one more variable. So let's go over to variables here, make a variable, and this one is going to be called count. Now, we need this to be for this sprite only, and Scratch has a very useful feature, and that is that if you make a variable for a sprite and then you clone that sprite, it clones the variable with the clone. So each clone will have its own unique variable called count, but you must ensure that it's for this sprite only, otherwise this won't work. So we've got a new variable called count for this sprite only, and we're going to click OK. Now we don't need to have this variable on the stage up here, so we'll hide it in a moment. But first, let's set count to 0, like so. Then we're going to hide it. So hide count. And then we can start our cloning, and we're going to make 10 clones, like so. Now, as we make the clones, we are going to advance the count variable by 1. So every time a clone is made, it will have its own variable, and that variable will be set to a different number. So the first clone and its variable will be set to 1, the second to 2, the third to 3, and so on and so forth. Each clone having its own variable with its own unique number. That means we can use that variable to animate that clone differently to all the other clones. And then the other thing we're going to do here is we're just going to make each clone a little bit smaller than the previous one, like so. Now, let me pause again, go and make this variable count for this sprite only, and finish this code algorithm. Okay, so we're making the clones, and now we need to create the code to animate them. So when I start as clone, of course, the first thing we are going to do is change the layer. So each clone is going to, whoops, that's the wrong one. We are going to go forward by 1 layer. So each clone is going to go forward by the count layers. It'll ensure that each successive clone is on top of the previous one. So clone 10 will be on the top, and clone 1 will be at the bottom of the stack, if you like. Next, we're just going to put a wait in here of ½ second. This will help to time our animation. Let's move up a little way here. Then we want to show the clone. And now we're going to go into our forever loop. So these are going to be continually animating. And we want to turn. And we're going to make each of these clones turn at a different speed. We're going to take a multiplication operator, which is the one with this little star in it here. And we're going to put a join over here. And in this we're going to do 1 point. Over here we're going to put the count, and here we're going to put the spin speed, like so. Next up, we're going to set the color effect, and we're going to use exactly the same calculation to set the color effect as the clone rotates. The only difference being that we take spin speed out here and we replace it with the color rate variable. Let me pause and let you code this algorithm. Okay, finally we're ready to test our game, and I'm going to go back here to full screen mode. I'm going to press E. You may need to do this several times to make sure your game has reset, and I'll press B, and here we go. Nothing is going to happen until you start to move your spin speed slider, and you'll begin to see this beautiful effect in which each segment rotates at a different speed, and things get more fun when you start to change the color rate. Of course, we can go reverse here as well, and if we go to a nice slow speed, we can clearly see the different segments rotating at different speeds and aligning and unaligning. I'm going to pause here to allow you just to enjoy the illusion. So that is all the coding complete for this lesson. We've learnt something new here. We've learnt that you can create a variable that is specific to a clone, and that's very, very useful. And we've been able to use our variables in an interesting way to create unique animations for each clone. Of course, it only remains for me to say that you can go and experiment, but before you do that, we should file, save to your computer. I'm just going to save over my template game, so I don't need to rename this. Once you've experimented, go back to File, Save to your computer, and don't forget to version it so you can always go back to the original code that I've taught you. And that is it for this lesson. Please experiment. Please have some fun with it. I think you'll agree it's a simple bit of code, but it creates a really